This audio presentation was pre-recorded and edited for brevity and clarity.
Hello and Happy New Year. Welcome to the first BrightFocus Macular Chat of 2023. My name is Diana Campbell and I'm pleased to be here with you today to talk about increasing independence with assistive technology. We're going to spend about 30 minutes discussing how to use native technology or technology that is already on your smartphone or computer, as well as helpful low vision apps and other tips. For those of you who are new to our chat series, this chat is brought to you today by BrightFocus Foundation. We fund some of the top scientists in the world who are working to find better treatments and ultimately cures for macular degeneration, glaucoma, and Alzheimer's disease. And we do events like today's chat to get the latest news from science as quickly as possible to the families that are impacted by these diseases. You can find much more information on our website, www.brightfocus.org. Now I'm pleased to introduce today's guest, Jerry Bellis. Jerry is the Access Technology Director at the Massachusetts Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired and manages and oversees all recruitment and training of volunteers at the Massachusetts Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired Assistive Technology Training Centers. He brings over 10 years of experience in the assistive technology sector, including 5 years at Perkins School for the Blind, where he was an assistive technology training specialist. Jerry has also helped companies and universities streamline accessibility guidelines and develop solutions for employees with visual impairments. Jerry, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Diana. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I think this is a really exciting topic. We get all kinds of questions, so I'm going to dive right in. Let's start with something that is a big issue for many people affected by macular degeneration, and that is reading. Can you tell us about screen readers? What are they and how do they work?
So a screen reader is a built-in audio that is controlled either by a keyboard commands or by a gesture. And when you navigate to a particular location on the screen, it'll read the information back to you. So it's TTS, it makes the text readable back to you, text to speech. And so a screen reader is really how a person who is totally blind would navigate a website, navigate their email, navigate their home screen or their desktop environment. It's how folks that are completely blind actually, have really good jobs, are able to really contribute in society. So it's since the inception of it with JAWS, and I think there were others that came out. So that was in the early 90s, late 80s. And JAWS stands for access with speech. And that really allowed people to, access their digital environment. So what's really a helpful trend in that space is that now it's not like a third-party solution like JAWS was, which, really has been the gold standard for years. Now you have open source screen readers like NVDA. So, those are no cost to a person. Then you have built-in screen readers like VoiceOver that will work on your iPhone. Really, any Apple product that you can think of, it'll work on it, even on your Apple Watch or iPad Touch or iPod Touch. Almost anything that you could think of, your Apple TV. Then you have screen readers now built into the operating systems like Narrator for Windows. There's even a screen reader built in for the Chromebooks that you get as well. So it's a known technology, but it is something that has really changed people's lives. So then there's how does that benefit someone who's low vision, right? So there is a split that you have to kind of make a determination as a low vision or / legally blind user. When is it appropriate to use it or not to use it? And so it gets used a little bit differently by those that have some vision, but it's still just as valuable. And so there's a distinction that's made between a full screen reader and screen reading on demand as well. So I like to kind of make this distinction. So with the screen reader on demand, I'll use an example. So for example, in your accessibility settings on your iPhone, there's a place that's called spoken content. This allows you to just swipe down with 2 fingers from the top left-hand corner of your screen and have a screen reader read for you the information that's on your screen reader. Android has this as well. And that's also one I didn't mention. So Android also has a native built-in screen reader called TalkBack. But going back to this point, so with the 2-finger swipe down, that just reads to you the text that's like right in front of you, or like an email. And that's what I call screen reading on demand, just to kind of give it a label. Whereas a full-blown screen reader, or a comprehensive screen reader, reads everything on the screen. And that's that's obviously very valuable, because the screen reader on demand is not going to read everything on the screen. It's not going to read the actionable buttons like create a new note or your address bar or your menu bar. It'll just read you the text. Whereas a full-blown screen reader, a comprehensive screen reader, is going to read your address bar. It's going to give you just an overwhelming amount of information. And so, like, one of the challenges when you first start learning it is you get a little bit of cognitive overload, because it's just reading all the elements on the screen. So you kind of just, it's so that's one of the things I sort of warn people about when you're first learning how to use it. You can get cognitive overload. That's why for someone with low vision or who doesn't need it all of the time, but there is real value in it, specific to navigation in particular. But you have to decide what the split is. Do I use it 5% of the time, 10% of the time, 20% of the time? And a lot of this is really in assistive technology, accessibility, is finding what works best for you. Because I've been doing this for like 15 years. And one of the things that I've learned, if I've worked with one client, I've worked with one client. The principles apply, right? But they apply differently to people. So it's really about finding what works best for you, because you're going to use it slightly different than somebody else. But in terms of screen reader technology, it's there. It's built into almost everything now, and it's built into your TVs. They're not as good as iOS or Android or your mainstream vendors of technology, but it's kind of nice to have like a screen reader in a TV, even though it's like I said, it's not great. But yeah, thankfully it's there, and you take it wherever you go. So.
Great. So we've talked a lot about, iPads and Android and iPhones. What about like a desktop computer? We do have some people that, prefer to use either a laptop or desktop over, a Chromebook or an iPad or something like that. Are these same tools available in the same way, or do they need to do something slightly different on an actual computer?
So the technology functions a little differently. So like for example, on the mobile platforms, the gestures are really established. Can't say that for Windows, for example. You're better off using a keyboard. That would kind of be the main difference. Is you're better off using the keyboard commands, whereas for the mobile, for your iPads, your tablets, it's probably more advantageous to use gestures, your hands to navigate the screen. versus
Okay.
using a keyboard. I think
Right.
that's one of the differences. But the concept's sort of the same. Like when you're doing, I think generally speaking, when you're doing bulk work, you're going to do it on a desktop, so it's certainly designed for that. And you take advantage of whatever the desktop offers in that context. I think what's kind of helpful is, so there's key commands, right? There's key commands that are for the screen readers specifically. But in terms of navigation, there are key commands that are native to the operating system. So if you know both, that's a huge plus.
Right. So I imagine to turn these on, you would go to the settings and look for accessibility. Is that sort of where everything lives, related to all the different things we've just talked about?
So yeah, so for both Mac and Windows, you'd go to, and Chromebook, you'd go Android, whatever. You'd go to accessibility settings, and then you could enable them. And then you really want to know, how do you activate the shortcuts? And that actually includes like the shortcuts for iOS and Android too, because it's really helpful, particularly when you start to learn it. It's really helpful to know how to turn it off and on easily, because
Right.
in the beginning it can be a challenge, right? And it does take some getting used to, you know. And honestly, for some people, they find it a bit challenging or even annoying, because they're not used to getting, you're used to receiving information visually, not auditorily. And it does go back to that cognitive overload piece. So, you know, what I've always suggested is be patient with the process, be patient with yourself, and use it as you need it. And I think having that mindset will help out. I think one of the things I tell clients is, as long as you're willing to learn something, do something a different way to accomplish a task that you used to do, you can regain something you thought was lost, but you have to sort of be willing to do it a different way. And at first it may not feel natural, but if you're able to do it, you know, you can access your banking information on an app independently. You can read the paper independently. You can search for things independently. You can shop independently on an app. Granted, that's not, you have to learn how to do that one more, because that's a little bit more challenging because it's more involved and you have to learn how to, you know, navigate the websites. But going back to your original question, yeah, there's slight distinctions between them, between the desktop and the mobile.
Sure, that makes sense. We've gotten a question from one of the people listening right now, and of course we all know that everyone has their preferences between Androids and iPhones. Is there one in particular that's more popular in the blind and low vision community? Is there one that has more features than the other?
So I think the data would show that people definitely gravitate more towards Apple. And the best way that I can describe it, in my assessment, it's kind of like driving. First time I got on in a Mercedes-Benz, the suspension was unbelievable. Like it just hugged the road. So this is the best example I have for this. It might be different than driving a different vehicle, whatever the vehicle is, right? Just by way of analogy. So when you're navigating on the actual on your iPhone, it's just very smooth. It's very consistent. It's super stable. Where Android, it's made massive improvements. It's getting better. It introduced multi-touch gestures recently to make it easier to control the Android device. And there are pros and cons to each. But I think a large portion of visually impaired community navigate towards, particularly more on the lower vision side, navigate more towards, iDevices than they do Android devices. But the Android piece, it's increasing because it is getting better.
Great, thank you. I have another question relevant to some of the points we've been talking about. What about how to make a website more readable? How do you adjust the contrast? Can you adjust the contrast on any web page? Can we talk about contrast settings a little bit?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So you could tackle it a couple of different ways. So I think the best way to tackle it, I think in my opinion, the best way to tackle it is to know your screen magnification software, know your accessibility configurations, or get familiar with them first. Because with your accessibility settings, like I use a Mac because I use all of the platforms, but like I use on my Mac, and I can change the contrast just by pressing a shortcut. And the contrast will, help improve visibility because it's a black background with white text now. That's one way to tackle it, and that's the one I would suggest first. Then there's other settings that apply to, like for Windows, for example. There's a way to change there's multiple ways to change the contrast. There is a setting that allows you to use the magnifier and change the contrast. Then there's a global contrast setting where you could just do a shortcut key and it will globally change the contrast for the whole operating system, not while you're using magnifier. Then you have high contrast settings that you can adjust in Windows, which is different than the one I just mentioned. And then there are settings that you can adjust for your web browser, like Safari or Edge. But which is good, right? So like on our Mac, for example, you can set the default, and you could do this on other platforms, but on this Mac right now, I have my font set at default like 16. So all text will appear as 16 font. And so like what's nice about that is that means I may need to use less magnification when I use the magnifier versus because the difference would be what? Like, so for me, I'm low vision, so I'll use between 6x and 10x to read something. But if I increase the font size to 16 to 20 font, I just want to make a distinction. From increasing the font size to 15 or 20, 16 or 20, instead of, so then I may need to increase the magnification, which is an entirely different number. When I say 6 or 10x, 6x stands for 600 times the original size. So if I increase it to 20 font, I may just need to use 6x versus using 8x. So part of it is that there's an exploring process. You have to sort of experiment a little bit and figure out which configuration works best. But there's multiple ways to make it a little bit more accessible. If we're specifically talking about font pieces or text size, there's multiple ways to do that.
Great. This is slightly different than what you just finished discussing, but similar to kind of the theme we've been talking about. And this is one that's, I think, hard in general. When you're streaming things on the different apps on TV, some of them do certain things, some do others. And we've got a question from Mary asking, when choosing movies, how do you get the short descriptions read out loud? Is that a TV setting, or is that specific to each app?
So it's sort of both. There's a configuration on the computer. On the television that you can do, depending on your TV. And then there's also So if you're like streaming Netflix, they have an audio description button that you can select. And that's usually like, so that should be across the board sort of with, if it came with audio description, right? So, because some of them don't. So you got to check if they did come with audio description or not.
Gotcha. So that was a nice segue into, certainly another big topic discussed very frequently among our community of people who have AMD, and that is apps. They're looking for apps that could help them with their daily life activities, and other things that they're doing on a frequent basis. Can you share some of the best non-native or third-party apps that help people to see or assist in completing these daily tasks?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the native first. So the camera app actually has some OCR. So getting familiar with that a little bit, just the native camera app on your phone, at least I think that's actually for both Android and iOS. So, it'll pick up text and even read it out loud. So if you don't have, if you don't have any of these apps, you could start with your phone already and kind of explore that just for fun. But if you're looking for a more comprehensive, and I would suggest this too, right? Like if you're looking for a more comprehensive solution, you want to do Seeing AI. Seeing AI is an optical character recognition solution. For those that don't know what that is, all it is you take a picture, it recognizes your phone recognizes the text, reads the information back to you. That's really all that is. Depending on the app. So if we're using Seeing AI, for example, that app gives you multiple. It's kind of like a suite, sort of. It gives you multiple functions. So there's the one where you just put the camera over the information, and it begins to read it right away. And just a caveat on that, then you just need the appropriate techniques for how to use it, right? Then there's one that reads it, that scans it and converts it into text that you can actually see, and that you can play back with either voiceover or a play button. So then it actually reads your currency. It does facial recognition. So that's a really good one to start. That's only for iOS. For the Android side, you have Google Lookout, which is really good as well, and it does a lot of the same things. You have Blind Square, which is a navigation app. I think that's a paid one. Microsoft came out with one not too long ago, and why the name is escaping me, I don't know, but they do have a GPS app as well. Soundscape is the name of that app. So that's a good one for navigating. So as you're navigating outside, it calls out names. And there's stuff that's coming out that's sort of in beta that's going to help with some recognition, where you point a finger, like kiosk recognition and different things like that. I can't get too much into that, but there's stuff that's out there as well that'll be coming out soon. There's glasses that reads information to you that can work with apps. But the primary ones that I commonly recommend are going to be your OCR apps. You do have and the Soundscape apps. But there are some that will be coming out. I can't get into too much, but the future looks bright for this stuff, particularly with the AI piece.
Oh, that's wonderful. And just for anyone who might not have caught it, OCR stands for Optical Character Recognition. So if you see that, it's the same thing as OCR. I'm not sure you'll know the answer to this, but we just got a question about, can voice reader apps on your phone be connected to a hearing aid?
Well, yeah, because your phone would connect. So if your phone connects and you're using an app, it will read the information from your phone.
Gotcha. So we recently became aware of an app called Be My Eyes, and it sounds really, really interesting and potentially helpful. Could you tell us a little bit more about that app?
Oh, sure. So that's a human-centered app, and so there are a few of them out there. Be My Eyes is one, where you have volunteers throughout the world that will help you to complete a specific task. You would just, sign up with them, download the app, and then you would you could point your camera at a physical document, and someone can help you read it. It would be a live human being, and it would help you, read that. Or if you needed to identify a building or a building number, or maybe read a sign that you can't read, the person will be on the other line and help you do that. Or read, a can of, a soup can or something. You could get a human assistance doing that. And there are other applications like that as well. But Be My Eyes is certainly one of them. MAB, the organization I work for, MAB, has a specific profile that you can sign up for. It's in the app, and so there's actually profiles that are specific. Like I think Microsoft and Google have specific profiles for the Be My Eyes application.
Great. So let's see. I had a question. Oh, I had a comment, actually. I'm sorry. So just to let everybody know, we're also going to be, for anybody who wants to request this at the end of the chat, we have an expert article called Apps for People with Low Vision. So many of these will be covered there. Another resource that I think is particularly interesting is with you, Jerry. When we met a few weeks ago in preparation for the chat, you told us that you have a YouTube channel where you post training videos about various types of technology. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what types of activities and topics are in on your YouTube channel?
Absolutely. So the YouTube channel is Jerry Feliz. You just have to put in the search Jerry Feliz Assistive Touch, and then it should populate my channel. And so in that channel, I have several videos. One of the ones I'd recommend is if you're going to use OCR, which I would highly recommend. I did one on seeing AI. So that takes you step by step on best practices for utilizing it, right? It's like one thing to have the app, but what are the best practices for utilizing the solution? So there's, I have, videos with inventors on there. I have videos with organizations on there. There's one I did with Accessible Pharmacy, which is a good one too. And there's other videos on, Mac accessibility, other videos on, best practices for using Uber with, assistive technology like VoiceOver and Zoom. Windows native accessibility functions. I think I have one on speech recognition. There's multiple videos there, so feel free to check out the channel. I'm also on the IAAP network, which streams out of Valley Eye Radio Wednesdays. I think it's 4 or 4:30 Wednesdays. If you want to check out their channel, or if you listen to these visually impaired listening services or reading services, I'm on that network. I'm on other channels in that network as well, but that's the one they have a fixed schedule for the broadcast. So anything that's on the YouTube page, they sort of broadcast it as well. So if you're looking for information that way, I also do private consultation. So if you needed assistance, you can reach me as well. I'm at 857-443-6636, and at jfeliz@mabcommunity.org.
That's so generous of you. Thank you. And for those who are typing Jerry's name into the YouTube search, it's Jerry, and Feliz, his last name is Feliz. So it's Jerry Feliz Assistive Touch. I guess that's about all the time we have today. This has been really, really helpful. I'm sure people will call you, and I'm sure we'll have questions, that are submitted at the end, and we can loop back with you. But we're really grateful for everything you shared with us today. And again, I definitely think, to me, it seems really overwhelming for somebody who's starting out. And I think the fact that you've got that channel and are, open to people contacting you is really wonderful. Our next BrightFocus chat will be on Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023. And in honor of AMD Awareness Month, we'll be interviewing 2 individuals who are living with AMD. So to close out today, Jerry, this discussion has given us so many tips and ways to use technology to our advantage. Before we conclude, are there any final remarks you'd like to share with the audience?
Diana, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and hope to collaborate.
We do too. Thanks so much, Jerry. And this officially concludes the BrightFocus Macular Chat. Thanks for joining.
The information provided in this recording is a public service of BrightFocus Foundation and is not intended to constitute medical advice. Please consult your physician for personalized medical, dietary, and/or exercise advice. Any medications or supplements should only be taken under medical supervision. BrightFocus Foundation does not endorse any medical products or therapies.